Welcome, everybody. So today we have the pleasure of hosting Sana Freeman, that is going to give us a presentation on concept art for games and animation. And more importantly, Sana is also going to talk about how to drive narrative through environment, storytelling, world building. So Sana has been Sana graduated in 2015 with a BFA of sequential art and a minor in ITGM. So I had actually the pleasure of meeting Sana. I was not a professor yet. If I remember correctly, I was giving a talk for the SCAD development, the game development network. So that's when I met Sana, and we talked a lot about art and pixel art and all that stuff, and we became friends. And so today she's coming to present her work. Sana has been working for a bunch of years at Rooster on shows, super well-known shows like Ruby, Genlock, etc. And now working at Skybound Entertainment on Invincible. And so I was actually asking Sana, I was wondering what show you guys would know. Do you know Invincible more than Ruby or Genlock? Like, so those of you that know Ruby more than anything else, raise your hand. Okay, Genlock, Invincible. Okay, there is a little bit of a parity, and all of the above. Okay, well, listen, Sana, this is your show now. So thank you so much for talking with us. And yep, the floor is yours.
And thank you for having me. Sorry if I'm a little coffee. I just ate a bagel. So he already introduced me, but hello, I'm Sana. And like you said, I graduated from SCAD in 2015, which was 7 years ago. I'm really old. I majored in sequential art and I minored in concept art and interactive and game design, though I kind of hung out around interactive and game design so much that people thought I was an ICGM major because I kind of preferred that crowd to the sequential crowd. After I graduated, I kind of freelanced for about a year. I hated it. Then I got a job at Rooster in 2016, and I was a concept artist. I also kind of did a lot of other work. Primarily, the secondary job would be matte painting, which does hardly applies to games at all. I was then laid off earlier this year, in quotation marks, because it is something legally distinct from a layoff, but it's basically a layoff because they were like, sorry, we can't keep you employed because we have no work, which is, you know, layoff. So now I work for Skybound Entertainment as a background painter, which for Invincible, which is one of those things where it's like game dev probably doesn't want to be a background painter, but if you ask me if I want to work on Invincible, I'm not gonna say no. So I took it. It's also a union job, and I know that's kind of unusual for game devs. So if any of you have any like union questions too, I'm happy to answer those. And also my other apology is there's not a lot of new professional work I'm showing in this portfolio because I'm not portfolio, a presentation, because like the last like 2 years of my professional work are under NDA. This Ruby Aerofill video game is going to release soon, so hopefully I can share the work I did for that. But for now, I'm sorry. Ruby 8 is the most recent professional job I am showing in this portfolio. So what I'm going to talk about is how I just start to tell storytelling in concept art. And I love this tweet: in game design, environmental storytelling is the art of placing skulls near a toilet. I think it's a very good tweet because what this is kind of making fun of is when you have a limited number of assets and you don't exactly know what the story of your game is. You just kind of say, well, everyone has teddy bears and skeletons inside them. Let's place those everywhere. And I'm going to slightly make fun of this lovely game. This is Timor. This is a very wonderful indie game. As you can see, these are cutting edge graphics. Lots of graphical fidelity here. And when there's a jump scare, it turns red because, you know, red's very scary, right? Now, obviously, I'm being sarcastic here in that, yes, this does get the point across, right? You're in a creepy place, it's red, it's scary, but I think many would agree that this is kind of amateur and we can do better. But even if you take it one step further, I'm going to dunk on myself here a little bit. This is some of my student work from all the way back in 2015. Now, I wouldn't call this awful per se, but there's really not a ton that describes what this environment is, right? Like, I mean, I'll say these signs and this like building, like with this window here, are probably the most unique features. But other than that, I mean, like, what are you doing, right? It's like you got like fence that's too tall up here. You have like boxes. It's clearly a mine, but there's not like too much structure to this. So this presentation is going to go over how we can do better. And here's my other apology slash disclaimer is that this presentation will basically be my opinion, right? Like generally, no matter who you're asking in the industry, their advice will subconsciously be getting you closer to where they are. So you ask like a AAA guy, they're going to give you advice that is more applicable to AAA than anything. If you ask an indie guy, they're going to give you the path to indie even by accident. However, I do think everyone has something valuable to add no matter what, and you don't exactly know where you're going to end up to begin with anyway. So I say, just take all advice, take what is useful to you, leave what's not, and keep moving forward. So I'm going to start with me getting an assignment, right? I am tasked to design a desk, and I start with the desk because this is probably one of the biggest like lame assets I see in even AAA games, right? So it's like, okay, you have to make a desk for our environment, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll start with the desk. This is probably the most standard desk I see in concept art ever because it's instantly recognizable as this IKEA desk, and it works, right? You got it. And then, people, they need to sit at the desk. So I'm going to IKEA, purchase my IKEA chair, plop it in my game. And well, what do people do at a desk? Well, like they read, but then you're like, God, my desk, it's so boring. Like, how do I make this top right? Let's like put these papers all over the desk, because now it's like visually interesting, right? But like it's still kind of plain and all the papers are plain. So like we'll put pens here. And the thing is, like, I've seen this desk in so many games, and it's like, this isn't wrong per se. It gets across that it's a desk and someone uses the desk, but you're kind of thinking, like, what time period is this even? Like, my game takes place in 2015. Would they even be having a book open on their desk? And so what I'm going to go over is my thought process on how to just do this better. And I'm going to dog on myself too, because like, for instance, this is something I did for a student project at SCAD as well. And it was for a sci-fi environment that was meant to almost be like a secret laboratory. But then you look at all these desks and like, what do they say? I think we even cut this from the environment because it was like, what are we doing, right? So well, I'm going to take what I've learned, and now this time, instead of just seeing the desk and being like, I have to make a desk, I go to my art director and I ask, what kind of desk do you want? And he says, I want a desk that's specifically for a SCAD student. So now I start to do my research, and what do I do? This joke I make might not apply because of the remote thing, but like, so at SCAD, we didn't have good desks in the dorms. We had these terrible drawing tables that I hated because I'm a digital artist. And you had to do all your drawing all 101 on there. So you have like these paint stains, right? But see, I'm a digital artist. So I had a laptop on top of my paint stained table, and they do have to sit at the desk. But I don't have room for both the desk and the terrible stool they give me. So I have my terrible stool. And like I have a Genlock mouse pad because I'm a modeler, so like I have to have the middle mouse button for my Razer mouse, right? So like clearly this is now being like a younger person. I'm a digital artist, so I have my plug-in tablet, and I don't like walking into Montgomery Hall to get my plug-in tablet. And I have a headphones so I can ignore my roommates while I'm working. And I'm a gamer, so I got my Xbox controller and all my devices I can't all plug in at once. And I'm a Ruby fan, so I have my print I got from what's the SCAD anime con? I don't remember. I don't even know if they still have it. And I got a clip-on lamp so I don't like knock it over, and string lights to like give me some more light that doesn't burn my eyes out. and I gotta like have this box that I put my push pins in and stuff that I never ever use. And I have my notebooks so I can take notes from Professor Gouchard's lectures because I had learned things from writing them down. And then I have these sticky notes I never use, but my mom told me to get them, so they're here. And after this, because it's so busy, I do add some like color cohesion to it, just to make sure it all blends together. And then when you put these side by side, instantly, obviously these are two very different things, but inevitably, like this one on the left tells just much more of a story about what the character is, the time period, and has more visual interest than the desk over here. And I mean, this desk would still work, so it's not like you can't ever make this wooden desk. I would just, again, take the same approach I did here and say, well, what kind of office is this? Is this like Dunder Mifflin, where they're pushing papers on terrible computers, or is it like something like Prey, where it's meant to be more high tech? Just applying this more, just with more deliberate choices when designing, rather than just saying, well, we need visual details, let's just add papers. And for an example of where I did this in my workplace was when I was designing this robot hand for Ruby, and I really had not much to go off on this because so in animation you primarily work off storyboards rather than like prototypes and such. But the storyboards just had like a standard ball joint arm, and in art I'm really not a giant fan of that because you rarely ever see machines with just ball joint arms because they're very difficult to actually control in real life. But the boards did what they needed to do, right? They just need to show this is the moment that we need to have, and it is then the designer's job to make it work, right? So I did my research on actual robot arms in real use, and you notice that like they're not just a ball joint like a human arm would be. They have like all these different connections, so they can move very slowly and very precisely, because even though Ruby's a cartoon, it's not meant to feel like super goofy. um so that's when I came up with this design, which it very much resembles stuff like this. I did have to add this hand, which again, this hand isn't something I'm a big fan of, but it's what the director wanted, so sometimes you have to concede. But designing this would I had to also explain this to the rigging department and the modeling department how this needed to work, because I could do this in like 10 different drawings, but so instead I made this terrible video. Now this isn't great because there's no rigging on this. This is literally just me twisting the models, and it's not great, but it just gets the idea across very quickly to what the modelers and the riggers need to do. And that's kind of what I ended up doing. And this could also apply to like many different things, right? Like one designs I keep thinking of is like the Thorian from Mass Effect, which if you haven't played Mass Effect, because God, it's like how old at this point, like 14-15 years, like Jesus. It's like this giant creature that's almost like a heart in the middle of the tree, and it's meant to feel extremely alien. But even though it's meant to feel extremely alien, it takes like inspiration from a lot of different things, like not these things specifically because I did not work on Mass Effect, but it gives this creature like a certain logic to it, where if you remember back to Time War, when they were trying to make these creatures, like they literally just, I'm sorry Time War dev, your game's hysterical, I love it, but like they're just kind of clay dolls and they don't really resemble like a real creature. Whereas once you start to pull in all this influence and mush it all together, then you get something that feels real and not weird. Like, I guess for example, better than Time War, but like not the best, is this is a design from Titan AE. His name is Sith. And it's something that gets a lot of criticism because despite this like top thing feeling very much like a bat mixed with a human, like these legs like look extremely weird. And if you gave this to a rigger, they would absolutely hate you because well, the reason these legs look so strange is they have like 2 extra joints in them, So this will never move like a real creature. There's no creature that exists like this. So it just appears odd. So instead of something that feels alien, but still a lot more like in line with how we perceive the world, you would get this. But if you like forget to pay attention, then you get this kind of weird shape. I also have this other example that I really like with this logic with the horses is that now you have a leg like this, and without doing proper research or just inspiration, you might assume when the horse hits the ground that it would bend knees like this because this is how a human would bend their leg, right? But really, the horse weighs like how many times more than a human, like 2,000 pounds. Um, they really have to hinge their weight on a lower part of their legs so they don't just freaking, break their legs, right? So this video is actually what inspired me the most, weirdly, just how much these like subtle hints of detail really, really matter in terms of building your world. I know this isn't a lot of this isn't video games, but one example of this I think did it extremely, extremely well is this movie called Annihilation. If you're scared of body horror, don't watch this movie, but if you can take that, the basic plot of this world is when they go into this certain area, all life forms are merging together. So you get what is like this human merged with almost like a fungus or like a cancer and a plant just like growing all over this wall. Or you have like these trees that are growing from the sand. So and they're made of like glass. So they start to follow these crystalline structures that you would see in snowflakes. I think this is like fantastic example of how to tell the story in your environment very, very subtly. But you're like, wait, but I want to make a fantasy game. I don't want to make a real world boring game. Well, I am on your side because there's many different ways to approach this, right? Like, I love Mass Effect dearly, but I do kind of laugh at it a lot because like you're like, man, in the future, I sure wish that computer screens were harder to read and had less colors. But the thing with Mass Effect is these screens, you're not meant to use them when you're playing the game, right? It's meant to spread color around in the environment. And also, Mass Effect isn't meant to be our world, right? It's meant to be a very alien world. Um, it's almost like a world you would imagine sci-fi becoming if you were someone from like the 50s or 60s or even 70s. And so they take a lot of inspiration from like these old like radar screens or very old computer screens and then fantasy that up, which makes this world seem a lot more fantastical than something like Her. Her is also another movie I think is very brilliantly designed in terms of world building because Mass Effect very fantastical because it takes these older concepts and modernizes those, but Her specifically looks at our world and modernizes that. So it's a very grounded, very beautiful story. Recommend this 100% if you're into concept, maybe not so much game design, but beautiful movie. And there's like, I've kind of gone over how I figure out my stories, but there's tons of different ways to portray this to the rest of your team. And you should really think about what you're trying to get across when you are designing, right? Because if you're doing a top-down game like this one by what's your name, Margaret Lee, or no, this is Ashley Kieran. Sorry, Ashley Kieran's did this one. If you have a top-down game, you probably want to design from this angle. This is a concept from Skyrim. If you're going to be like in the ground and you want to see the entire 3D world, then this would work out. Or if you need to do something very technical, doing a very clean design. And I'm going to go over some tips I have and some challenges I've had in the workplace. One of those would be this set specifically from Genlock. Again, if you don't know Genlock, it's a 3D anime. I don't know if Reddit would consider us anime, but whatever. So I had to design this big open space. And so when you're at studio work, no matter what studio you're in, if they do have a long legacy, you're going to be reusing and retexturing a lot of assets because that saves time. Unfortunately, with Genlock, it was so different from anything Rooster Teeth had done that we basically had to design almost everything from the ground up. And I was tasked to design this space. So at the time, Rooster Teeth was very much pushing for every concept to be in isometric because it was very efficient. But for this space, it just wasn't working. I was like, okay, I'll do it anyway. But firstly, this area, you notice that it is a mecha show, and in order to accommodate the giant like space they needed, the space had to be giant. But then this concept ended up so pulled out, so the modelers are like, I don't even know what I'm looking at, right? And so we couldn't really explore how the set like was up close up. I mean, these trees, because they're tall, they're just blocking like important parts of the set. It was really hard to explain the height difference between things because again, it was just so pulled out, and isometric's just not good for that. And I'm like, Mr. Art Director, this is really, really tough. I don't know how to make this better without changing the angle. And he was just like, well, change the angle. So it's like, okay. So then I did these concepts in perspective, which is technically rougher than this one, but this allowed us to explore the space so much faster and so much better because the showrunner was like, I really want this to be foggy and misty, and I want these like mountainy plants. I want it to feel like the Rocky Mountains. So then I could get quickly painting these silhouettes of like these bushy things and this kind of dried grass with like the mist going around. And it's also a lot of, again, to explore height properly, because now we can see in perspective the holons versus the airplanes. And then it also allowed us to experiment much better with the height of the foliage and stuff. Like here, it's very difficult to tell that these trees are actually taller than this holon because they wanted the set to be blocked in animation and games to a lesser degree. I would say they really want to block off sight lines. And for your fun fact, the reason for this is if you see 3D animation, the models are enormous. Game models are much smaller than animation models. So blocking sight lines is like that much more important. There's your fun tip. And ultimately, this series of mood paintings was what the modeling team and lighting team mainly used. And it was like this point was kind of a turning point for the studio as a whole in terms of concept art, because there was just a lot less revisions that needed to be done because of confusion in the isometric concept art. And now I will summarize my full tips, starting with the thing I told you not to do, which is doing isometric simple angles. And I bring this up first just because I just dunked on it, because it's really good for quick turnarounds, and modelers love these kinds of concepts because they are extremely clear on what's going on. And it allows you to do both the objects and the environments at the same time. Like the modelers could like zoom into the shelf and see everything there very clearly. These concepts were drawn much bigger than you see on the screen right now, obviously, because that's studio work and you need to make it big. And it's really good if you have like a modular set and you needed concept sets quickly, but it's not super great for tighter details, and especially height. Height's really bad for isometric. Like I went to this talk forever ago from this animator from League of Legends, and he said that he was getting so angry because he kept everyone said that Darius's ult didn't feel very strong because he didn't jump very high. So he got really angry and put him like 200 meters in the air. And then suddenly everyone liked it. They're like, now it feels powerful. And it's just because that angle, it's so bad at height. And it confused the modelers too. Like this is the most cursed set from all of Ruby. Like because the set was done in isometric, the models are like, oh yeah, that's how high cabinets are, right? And that's how big a stove is. Not great. But for this set in Genlog, this was completely fine because it was meant to be kind of a big space anyway. And well, big for an office, small for a space in general. So this was absolutely fine. Described all the materials fine. So something like this, check mark for using isometric or modular, use isometric, not bad. And my second one is just doing rougher concepts in general. This might seem really obvious, but there is a way to do this stuff without leaving the modeler confused, which is, again, pretty obvious, but just providing photo reference, because if you can just provide this with this, you have the design right here, you have the material work right here. This gives the modeler absolutely everything they need to know, and this didn't take me that long at all. However, when you do these in a professional environment, I think there should be at least one concept that is pushed to completion just to show modeling and anyone else where the bar is. So they could be like, okay, I got you the reference for this with the sketch. Now make it this clear, right? So, but then you're like, wait, I don't have time for that either. Then you can design tighter roughs. And the reason I do push concept art so much is um, I think that a failure to plan is a plan to fail, in that you will, I feel like a lot of student projects do have difficulties with artistic fidelity. And if you just plan this all out ahead, you don't have to figure it out when it's a lot harder to do. Like, it's a lot quicker to do quick sketches like this than it is to have to revise a character model over and over and over again. Maybe not so bad for an environment like a modular set, but still it could take time. And even then, like, you can still push it even further. Like this, Christina Ness is also a previous SCAD student. I think she is a very good artist, and this concept, like, it still has kind of rough lines, but again, this tells you everything you need to know within a short period of time. And of course, I'm showing characters, and I found this guy on ArtStation like 2 days ago. And he's actually like a freelance modeler for Disney, and the way he presents his portfolio is kind of awful, but I like it because you can see all the really rough work that he just leaves in there. And so you might not have time for this big grand one over here, but you probably have enough time to do a sketch like this and get the plan clear to everyone on your team, right? So that's one reason I recommend it. But this is probably the one I use the most now. Is this was again part of the turning point after GenLec and Ruby 6 was just starting with a gray box and a block out base. And this is the one I think is most applicable to games. Because like I could make this and then I can hand this off to 3 teams that just need a model now, and they can work with this even though it's like not the best, but it works for me. And then I finish my concept right here, and my concept is complete while layout can use my model, and modeling can even use my model, and storyboards can even use my model, right? But this still is kind of like, not gonna say great, but it's still pretty detailed for what's like a gray box, right? It can be even tighter, right? Like even looser, sorry. Like this is one I made, and I barely actually made anything in this set. Like I think I made like the fence all by myself and these like tables, but otherwise a lot of this is just reused assets from like other places. I mean, my hay bales are literally like cylinders on their side, and then they're like, we don't have time, just hand this off. We just need this to hand off to a freelancer, and that's what we did, right? And the other reason I think this is in particular useful, well, many reasons, is let's say you have someone on your team that is like, well, I'm kind of like a 2D artist. I'm not so good at modeling or anything like that. This concept was made by Weston entirely with assets we already had for Ruby, and modeling was just able to like take this and just plop it in the show directly. So it's like if you have someone who's like, I'm not that confident in my 3D, set dressing is very easy to teach, put them to work there, right? And I recommend this just because I think the hardest part of doing student projects isn't exactly making the game, even though that's already very tough. It's trying to manage everyone who has not the same amount of time to devote, not the same amount of motivation to devote to the projects. So I'm more for like the spiral method of development. Jack Mamias might hate me for saying that, but that's just my opinion, Jack Mamias. So and the last thing is just doing modular concept art. This one's the most obvious to environment artists. Environment artists love modular because it saves so much time. I don't often do this, weirdly enough, but most environments I do are designed with some modularity in mind. It can lack specifics for what you're trying to tell your story with, but you can still tell like a culture through all this, right? About like what's going on with this world. And it's a high upfront cost, but you can like use it like a lot. Like these are all from different episodes of using just the same set of stuff, and they're, I guess the job done. And if this is like not appealing to you, it doesn't always have to be like this segmented. Like this is something I did super early for Ruby 8, and I showed this to the modelers, and they were like, "Yep, this works," because like there's all these different parts they can use for other parts, and the material work is clear enough. And they're like, "Yeah, that's kind of what we need for this." And I think that's about it for me. So thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you learned something. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. Do you guys have any questions? This is the time now. Go for it. Anybody? Raise your hand or like use the little hand icon. Oh yeah, Paris, go for it.
Talking about the modular stuff, is there any way that you could go back to that slide?
Yeah, hold on, let me share my screen again. Share screen. Yeah.
Like would the, like as a concept artist, like would you like drag and drop those different things just to like create like a building, or are those like 3D model assets that you drag and drop to create like environment assets?
It can be both. This one was actually done before I was comfortable enough with 3D, so yeah, so these are 2D drawings that I would use to concept with, but it can, but this one, sorry, where'd it go? Oh my god, I'm dumb. Oh yeah, so this one was actually made using 3D assets primarily, and then basically comped and Weston did some painting over in Photoshop. So both.
Okay. Yep. And then like would texture artists like often take a lot of your drawings and like your concept art to create like materials for texturing?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm sad you asked that because there are examples of that in Ruby done by the concept artists, but they're not in this presentation. My bad.
Oh no, it's yes. Okay. I was just curious.
I would say The Sims is also one to look at too. They have a lot of 2D artists do the textures. Yeah.
Thank you.
Vincent, you had a question?
It wasn't a question as much. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, making sure. It wasn't a question as much as the comment as you said earlier, a failure to plan is a plan to fail. And I love that because, yeah. I mean, as you saw before, like with the isometric, they using the isometric, like the first thing, with the giant field. It really was just not really poor planning, but just like they didn't think ahead.
Yeah.
So I think just thinking ahead is also something that's like really good for design too.
Yeah, for sure. And the modelers loved you because, again, the more you can figure out before you get to modeling, the better it is, because it's so much faster to change a concept than it is to change a model. So, yeah. And you are students, you have limited time. Sorry.
No, it's exactly the same thing that we do in class. Like all projects are usually like thoroughly planned, like not unlike what you're doing, sketches, mood boards, to kind of like get the sense of what is it that we are building. Sometimes even like mood boards are separated in two different things, where it's like you have like the stylistic mood boards, which is like it's going to stylistically look like this. And then you have the real world mood boards. Well, a little bit like what you've done, right, with your plates of food. You say, okay, well, the plates are going to be dressed like that, and this is the type of food you're going to get. This is what that food looks like in real life, but this is what the style and the treatment is going to be. So I really like that. I think students, that's definitely a thing that needs to happen more often, is to kind of not only plan the inspiration of what these things look like, but also how are you going to render them like? Because often people know what those things are supposed to be, but they don't quite know how they are supposed to be handled, right? If you're going to make, for example, a stylized game, are you going to treat it like Zelda Breath of the Wild? Are you going to treat it like I don't know, Final Fantasy? Are you going to treat it like, I mean, because these are all stylized, but in a very, very different styles, right? So I think like understanding what the execution is very important. Do we have any other questions?
what I wanted to add to that, the reason I do think those subtle things are important is, in the words of great philosopher Mr. Plinkett, you didn't see it, but your brain did. So like an audience is going to notice something looks off, but they might not be able to articulate why. But you can figure that out before they question it so that it looks all nice and stuff. Yeah.
Completely in agreement. Any other questions? Anybody? Don't be shy. Paris, another one, or is it just the remainder?
Oh no, yeah. I just have one more question about like when you consider like an environment done, like going back to the desk example that you had, like when do you consider done? Is it just like whenever you get done within the time restraint, or is it whenever you feel like this space feels like lived in enough?
I would say often it's just the time restraint when it comes to professional work. Like people want, like, we kind of joke that you will turn something in as soon as the deadline hits, because you want to spend so much time refining and making it perfect. But in like a professional environment, you just don't have the time for that, which is a little unfortunate, which is how you get like that terrible kitchen in Ruby 4. Like by the time it was noticed how terrible it was kind of too late. Which is why I do mention be nice to game devs sometimes, because usually if there's like a very glaring error, it's because they were sleep deprived and they needed to get that environment done a week ago and it just needed to go. You know what I mean? So, I mean, not saying no criticism. People kind of like get on my case a bit because they're like, why are you okay with the audience being mad? And I'm like, I'm okay with criticism, just learn to take it. Like there's a lot of people who just get really defensive. And I'm like, just say, it's a screw up. It happens. We have deadlines. Gotta hit them. Yep.
So I do have two questions for you. One of them is the differences between being a concept artist, which is kind of like a little bit kind of like at the forefront of like all the thoughts that go into making the environment, versus being a background artist. So like, do you want to develop a little bit on this? Like, what are the different approaches that you have on both jobs?
So I'll say that the concept art is way more fun because you were designing worlds from the ground up, whereas when you're the background painter, so Rooster Teeth was a bit messy in the sense that like you really shouldn't have been doing as much design as you were doing as a background artist. I would say it's a lot farther removed from games because games are real-time composited, whereas animation is I don't know what the term would be, like it's post-composited, I guess. In terms of just the matte artist, you will have to learn a program like Cinema 4D or Nuke, and you are drawing backgrounds per shot. Like the camera is decided for you and what's going there is decided for you. And you just really have to be a good painter, which is why there is overlap in concept art and background painting, because both of them require you to be good at painting. And I would say animation in general, like Rooster Teeth was kind of a mess, but productions like Skybound, they're very, very segmented. So you don't cross over that much. Like if you're a background painter, you paint backgrounds. You do not design, you do not animate, you paint backgrounds. Whereas when you're a conceptor, you can stick your hand in a lot more things. Like when someone asks, do you ever do textures when you're a concept? Yes. And yeah, that's kind of why I enjoyed concept more personally, just because it's more freeing, more stuff to do. But I like background painting too, just because I like painting. So. And again, it's Invincible. Not gonna say no to Invincible. So,
yeah. Kate.
Oh, Kate, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So going off of that, so in terms of the game developers, when you hand them off concept art, do they have any say in the environment that you had pre-built and maybe rearranging stuff, or did they just sculpt what they're given?
No, for sure they can decide, and I kind of expect them to actually, because I am not a good modeler. I model specifically to make something look the way I want, and I wish I could show you my more recent work because I added more of my terrible textures and colors in there and more lighting. the other thing too, I guess, is why I expect them to change it a lot is because I work in Blender. That's not the industry standard right now, but I work in it because it's a lot more convenient and it's free, whereas the industry standard right now is currently Maya. So yeah, they will change a lot. Now, sometimes they want to make changes that like aren't really pre-approved. So I'd recommend when you're on the job just to like talk to your art director and be like, hey, is this change cool or not? Because there have been a few times they're like, actually, I think the funny one with this, let me share my screen real quick so I can demonstrate the example is and share the story of why this was designed the way it was. So, oh my God, I'm very sorry. Hold on. I need to get to it. I'm almost there, guys. Don't
No,
worry.
no, no worries.
Okay, so this one, so the reason that these pipes are sunken into the ground is because, okay, so in animation, you're gonna get a lot more stuff that's like goofy because you can brute force so much animation, whereas you can't really brute force things in games, like they have to work. So they wanted the characters to be able to sit on this door in the pipe and get sucked up into the pipe, right? So it had to be this low. And at first the modeler was like, okay, guys, I fixed it. I made the pipes come out of the ground so they weren't, because they were clipping into the ground, and that's not what you wanted, right? And we're just like, sir modeler, no, they need to clip into the ground because that's what the director wants. And he was like angry about it because it looked worse than what he made. But you know, sometimes it's just how it be, you know. Just gotta put up with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Vincent, do you have a question?
Follow-up question. So like when you put models to make a scene, do you ever outsource, as in like not like freelancing, but do you ever go online and find some free models and throw them in? Does the company ever do that, or do you ever do that?
Yes, but you do have to be careful. Like mostly what I'll do just to be safe is I will just make my own really blocky stuff. Like, you know, it's like this like console I made is just a rectangle with a rectangle on top of it and some like panels extruded in. And because I don't need I don't need that much information because I have to design this console anyway. I don't know what I want it to look like in the final. You're gonna see that more in when you're working in professional, like the actual modeling step, because like unfortunately it's just a matter of time. Like there are some projects where you'll have like unlimited time, unlimited budget. Like I remember everyone freaking out about like Arcane when it came out because Arcane is so gorgeous, had so much money behind it, but oftentimes in the real world you just don't have enough time, so they'll purchase like a kit, like a city kit, and do that. I would say free models often not, just because the usage on them, the people have kind of weird usage about it. That being said, textures.com is the backbone of all game dev and VisFX and animation. So we'll use from that all the time. That site's great. Right, highly recommend that site. You should know what it is if you're modeling. So, yeah.
I actually have a follow-up on that, Vincent. Another reason why you need to be very careful about using kind of like open assets and things like that is that the people that are going to read those things, they don't necessarily know what you created, what you took. So potentially an asset that you think as the set dresser is going to be redone by someone and things like that, they consider it good enough. And then it kind of like passes down the production and can potentially pose copyright problems and stuff like that. So usually that's the reason why like studios frown at kind of using temporary stuff, because sometimes what was meant to be temporary kind of makes it all the way to the end and create liability.
That actually happened a lot in Genlock. And so what I started doing is I put a watermark on anything, because there were a lot of times where like, again, Genlock was such a clusterfuck of a production, sorry for my language, like, and so in order to prevent that from starting a huge copyright issue, we started putting these big watermarks on it that said not approved. And then sometimes I had people that were like, okay, we're done with this shot, but can you remove this watermark? And I'd be like, no, that's a copyrighted photo we must remove. So and also the other thing too is with free assets, a lot of them just kind of like they don't serve the needs of your project. Like this was another, God, Genlock, there were so many experiments in Genlock where they were like, we wanted to make real life locations in Genlock, and some people have done 3D scans of like the Chicago Museum of Science and stuff like that. So like, oh, we can just use this 3D scan. But if you've seen a 3D scan versus like a decent asset, the scans are so heavy and basically like they're untexturable because they're just way too heavy for you to unwrap. So it just wasn't usable, unfortunately. Yeah. But I remember when I designed a whale, that's in my portfolio actually. I found like a whale skeleton scan, and that was really useful for me just to like spin around and draw on top of it and get reference. So there's uses for everything, you know.
Any more questions? So I have my second question, because I think it may be interesting to kind of develop that for students. When you mentioned at your opening, you said that your job on Amazon, on Skybound, sorry, is a union job. Do you want to kind of like develop a little bit about this and why you think it's kind of like worth kind of like, what is it worth knowing of like union jobs versus non-union jobs?
Yeah, so I only wanted to talk about it a little bit because it's a very new conversation in game devs. I mean, like those Blizzard QA testers are the very first ones to unionized, and I think that's going to change in the coming days because obviously there are some just work conditions that aren't the best, like how you hear about devs constantly having to change jobs like every 2 to 3 years. That's pretty lame, or people getting underpaid. Whereas being in the union, it does provide a baseline of decent pay. That's probably the best part about it. Union insurance is great. I don't know what exactly it'll look like for game dev because I think game dev is so sporadic in terms of workflows are so different across companies, and 2D animation is like very, very figured out. Like they've got their roles and you are in one of these roles, whereas game dev I think will be a very different looking union when it eventually is made. But that is one thing. Know your worth as an artist, because there are many people who will take advantage of you, and you can't live on like $28,000 a year doing professional level work. Like, don't be a jerk, you know, but know your worth. Does that make any sense? And the union, like, I remember just being surprised that like I didn't have to fight for a raise. They're like, yeah, every 6 months you get a raise. I was like, cool. I don't have to argue about it at all. I just get it, you know? Yeah.
You're selling it.
Yeah.
Do we have any remaining questions? Do you have parting advice? You know, so a lot of the students here in a couple of months, they will be kind of like shopping around, presenting their portfolio, and kind of like trying to get that that proverbial foot in the door. Do you have any good advice that kind of like served you well?
My advice would be just put yourself out there, man, and don't make yourself a slave to a company. There are some companies that will be like, we only want to see this style portfolio, but I mean, like, I think reasonably they have to expect you to be applying for like 100 different companies, you know, just because it can be so hard to break in. Now, once you're in, it's a lot easier. But then, so just like, don't be scared. Get your work out there. Like, you're better than you think you are, right? And you don't have to compete with like Feng Zhu or like these like industry superstars, right? Just go in. And I know this sounds weird, but like, you see these people who just make these terrible movies, terrible games. They are confidently saying, God, I just made The Room. It's the greatest movie of all time. Like, have that guy's confidence. You think that guy cares that Jimmy 42069 doesn't like his art? No, he puts it out there and he's kind of successful now, right? He has his own online store, makes a lot of money selling underwear. It's great. So just, you know, get out there.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to end this. Do we have any remaining questions? That's the last call, people. Like, yeah, get them out there. No? Very good. Well, Sana, thank you very much for taking the time to kind of like go over your experience and give your tips. I expect some of my environment artists to think hard about this. Vincent, do you have like a follow-up? Oh, it's a clap. Oh, well, you know, it's like, I'm French. I don't know the difference between a raised hand and a clap. So yeah, thank you very much for those of you that will want to rewatch this. I'm going to let Zoom do its little thing, and when it's ready, I will post it on our Discord. Sana is on our Discord forum. Is it okay to kind of like for people to reach out to you privately?
Oh yeah, no, you can bug me wherever. I don't care. I have Twitter, I have Discord. You can message me on either.
So if you have any remaining questions, Sana is very approachable. Don't be shy. That's the whole idea of having alums kind of come back for those talks, is to kind of help you network and kind of like help you answer. You know, professors, we give you our answers, but sometimes it's also good to hear it from our students. So thank you, Sana, very much. Thank you, everyone. We had a really good audience today, 17 people. Good job. Thanks for showing up, and up to the next talk soon.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Goodbye.